Well, greetings and salutations to the 310 tribe, wherever you may be, this fine Monday night. It is so good to be back with you guys. I had a great weekend. I have a great week coming up, Lord willing, and looking forward to the spring and some warmer weather. I am not a big fan of cold weather anymore. I don't know what happened to me, but I used to love it when I was younger, but now it's just like, you can keep it. So it's probably going to preclude me from ever living really far north for a long period, at least through any kind of winter. I mean, I'll probably come back. Although I like skiing. I do like to ski. Well, good evening. Good evening. Good evening to everyone. Who's the first one on tonight? Merrick Michalek. Merrick Michalek. Am I saying that right? I don't know if I'm saying that right. Thank you for being the first one on. Emma Berean, Old Man Ed coming in second and third. And Mountain Skies, Derek, Uper Pingle, Lori Marie, Turnips Running Amok, Wanda, Ozmouse, hey Ozmouse, and Two Smidgen, and Lisa, hey Lisa. Hopefully, Lisa, you like the design. I thought the design turned out to be pretty cool. I'm pretty excited to see what they could do with that. I do want to do like the 310, like the little symbol I got up top. I just put that on the one of the sleeves. I think that turned out to be nice. Any hoots, good to see everybody here. Thank you, moderators, for being here. Stacy, I tried to add you. I don't know what happened. I thought it worked, but apparently it didn't. There's some other Stacy LK out there is going to be like, what's going on? I'm just getting some Go Juice ready. So yeah, great weekend. Had some of the best steak I ever had in my life last night. It was pretty awesome. And then on top of that, we had, I called it tiramisu, but it was creme brulee. So anyways, that was pretty amazing stuff. So good time fellowshipping with people. Got to hang out with Olivier and his wife last night, and Stan and Kathy. And this is good. And Alicia, we just had a good time. Good time. That await him steak was from the kitchen of Stan. Stan cooked that. It's a tri-tip, I think is what it's called. And one was sous vide. I called it soufflé, but it's sous vide or souved, which I don't know. It's like you vacuum seal some meat or something, and then you cook it. And then the other one was just cooked on the grill. And I thought they were both pretty amazing. So hi to Stan. Yep. Stan is a grill master for sure. All right. Well, tonight's a little, I apologize. You're stuck with me tonight. Sorry. Usually I have somebody more interesting on than me. So you're stuck with me tonight. So no guest on, but the title is called The Symphony of Deconstruction. Now, back when I was in, I don't know how old I was, junior high, I was really into heavy metal and stuff. So there was a band called Megadeth, and they had an album called Symphony of Destruction. Well, this is called the Symphony of Deconstruction. So it's not in the same sense of destroying things just for the sake of destroying things. Deconstruction really consists, it's more of a philosophical term, but I guess you could apply it to different things, words, books, fiction, nonfiction, etc. And it's basically going back and taking things all the way apart and trying to put it together back in a way that is kind of like historical revisioning, so deconstruction is not a good thing. And what I'm looking at with regard to the world is this very odd time that we're living in. And let me show this real quick. Let's see, share screen. All right. So we are living right at the tip of the blue one on top, right? We're in the old world, and yet the new world disorder, they're both disorders, are competing for relevance these days. They're competing for who's going to hold sway, who's going to hold power, because one ends up disrupting the other. And generally, these happen in what we call the fourth turning points. And I'll get to that in a little bit. But these are the in-between places, the liminal places between one state of being or one reality versus the new reality. And you can see from this simple diagram that the new world begins to make its way in early on through ideas, through academia, seminaries, government programs, think tanks, but it doesn't hold the majority power, right? It doesn't make the rules. It doesn't, and those people that are championing those certain types of policies and programs, for example, like Bretton Woods or the Marshall Plan, or go back to the 20th century and think about some big policies that were put forth as kind of the way things are, and that was supposed to be reality, and yet things have changed. That reality has changed. And so a lot of these institutions that were stuck in, that are still stuck in the 20th century mindset of like, this is how we did things, this is how things work. And I would largely look at more of like the boomer generation as being kind of wrapped up into that mindset of trying to keep things the way they are, because they spent most of their adult life in that way. And so now everything is changing. Everything's going digital. Everything is becoming tokenized. Everything is going wireless. It's going into the clouds. And I can imagine for those in the boomer generation that having to learn all this new technology, it's troubling enough for us as it is, right? I'm born in '74, so I'm not that far off, really. Where was I going with that? Yeah, so the older generations want to keep things the way they are because that's where their power structures are. And you can see that the triangle in the yellow, that it is also beginning to grow in relevance, and in this case in technology. It's changing. It's fundamentally changing the way things are. And we used to kind of laugh at this idea that what email did to the post office, for example, like it wrecked the post office, but the post office is still there, right? You can't send large packages via email yet, unless up until the point that they commercialize 3D printing, and that just becomes another appliance in your house, just like a toaster or a microwave. Now, at this present time, we still have to mail things, so we're still a little bit of the old world and the new world are colliding. And we're at that tipping point right now where things are the old world, and I'm going to include a lot of globalists into this, because a lot of the people that are promoting it and championing it, they're all 60 plus years old, and they've been championing this since the 90s or since the 80s, and this is how they think things get fixed. Some of them are true believers, but others, I would say the majority of them have their money and their wealth and all that stuff tied in with those kinds of systems, whether they're Green New Deal systems or they are, just based on old money structures and things like that. They don't want things to change because they're going to lose everything. And if they do champion some kind of change, it's because they've already got the head start on it and they already know what's coming. So they invested early, or they got in early on the ground, and they helped push the legislation along, or they helped push the political narrative along. And that's why they like Al Gore, championing this carbon credits and stuff. He's got somewhere in that mix. He would make bank. He would never. His kids' would never have to work again. If this went through. But it got so much pushback from like the normal world that it never really took off, and it took off in sputters. In some countries it did, in some countries it didn't. But every country that tried to do this Green New Deal, in good faith, it ended up destroying them. So, I mean, just off the top of my head, I'm thinking of Sri Lanka and the Netherlands, and there's some other places around the world where these really extreme radical environmental policies went into effect, and there was immediate economic pain. You could feel it. So let me close this real quick. So anyways, I have kind of an opening salvo for this, and this is somewhat of a complicated topic, so I want you guys to just bear with me as I read through it, and I want to break it down for you, and I do have some graphics that will help kind of explain what I'm talking about, and so don't worry about taking notes or screenshots or any of that stuff right now. There'll be plenty of time for that. Okay, so this is my summary up front of what this is all about, what I'm trying to explain to everybody. A Symphony of Deconstruction argues that the current historical moment represents not merely cyclical turbulence, remember that cyclical word, but the convergence of structural crisis, technological acceleration, and civilizational fatigue all at the same time within this fourth turning framework, as articulated by Strauss and Howe, who wrote this book back in, I think they wrote back in the late 90s. I think it was the late 90s they wrote this. I'm seeing if I had a citation for it down here. It's called The Fourth Turning by William Strauss and Neil Howe. Anyways, it's been around for a while. And it's talking about this 80-year cycles for generations. So the 2020s display simultaneous echoes of the 19-teens, overconfidence and interdependence in the 1930s, which is the exhaustion with liberal institutions, creating a uniquely volatile synthesis. Unlike prior eras, however, this crisis phase unfolds during the fourth industrial revolution, where artificial intelligence, surveillance, digital currencies, and autonomous weaponry make global governance technically feasible for the first time in human history. So for the first time in all of human history, the stuff that John was told to write down in Revelation 13, 2,000 years ago is now possible. So, I mean, if you think about, you're talking with a preterist, or you're talking with somebody that doesn't subscribe to the premillennial, pre-tribulation, rapture, 7-year tribulation, all that kind of stuff. They don't subscribe to that. Read through Revelation. Just have them read through Revelation 13, or read it to them, or read a passage from it, that the whole world is taken over by this system. We're the only generation. In fact, I would even go so far as to say not even this generation. I would say this generation in the sense of like from millennials on. So that would, I couldn't really see Gen X being in that boat, but like from millennials on, it's started to become a reality, especially now with what are they called? Homeland generation and Generation Alpha, whatever. So the new generations that are born after, not like 9/11. So deconstruction, again, it doesn't mean demolition. Instead, it means the breaking down. And in this sense, we're breaking what they're trying to break Western civilization down and reconstruct it into some kind of new configuration. The only problem is it doesn't work. Like communism, it doesn't work, and it's never worked anywhere it's ever been tried. And it doesn't even work in theory. So political rhetoric increasingly adopts framing things as existential. So we know that we're in this kind of era of deconstruction because all the political rhetoric it's being thrown around, it's always in this existential, like you have only 9 years left until 2015, until climate change completely floods the planet and raises the oceans by a quarter, like an eighth of an inch, and that's going to cause massive, all this stuff that the environmentalists, doom and gloomers were out there preaching. I mean, you talk about failed prophecies. Those guys have the worst track record of anybody. They're worse than cults in terms of like, the Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons. Like these guys have a worse batting average than the Mormon church. So that's saying a lot. So they increasingly adopt this existential signaling, political signaling. Everything is just this complete crisis. If they don't solve this one issue, if they don't pass this tax bill to raise this kind of money and pay for these kind of carbon credits, the world's going to die, by 2015 or by 2020. I don't know. We've heard so many dates being bantered around now, so it's really hard to keep up with all the failed prophecies. But the reason they're doing this is because the power structures from the old world order, they are seeing that system that they had is incredibly brittle, and it's beginning to break. And once those things breaks, they can't get their money back. They can't keep their wealth. They can't keep their power. So they were, say from like the late 90s up and through the 2020s, they were pushing this narrative that, everything is, gonna, go back to the 70s. It was global cooling. The 1980s and 90s, it was global warming. And then in the 2000s, it was climate change. It was just like whatever, anything that happens, earthquake, a comet hits the earth, whatever, a star out there, supernovas, it's because you have an SUV, or it's something to do with carbon credits, but they have to pitch it in this existential threat. Now, I would say on a counter argument that, when this administration comes out and talks about unchecked illegal immigration or open borders, those are truly existential in the sense of national identity and national sovereignty. Those are truly existential threats for real, because if you can't control your borders, you're not technically a country anymore. I don't want to get into all that. I'm just making a point with it. There are some existential threats, but they're being caused by the same party that seems to be so worried about them. They're just worried about things that are made up. They don't want to deal with any of the things that are real. So the elites, the powers behind the thrones, behind the deep state, these are the deep money families. I don't want to get into the names of all these folks, but these guys are generationally wealthy. From generation to generation, they just stay in the upper tier, 1% of 1% of the the world's population. Yet the distinguishing feature of this age, so we're talking about this age we're in that's overlapping between the old world order, the new world order. We're in the fourth turning point, and then we're at the end of that old world order is also part of the third industrial revolution. I know this is going to get super wonky. Hey, thank you, Rick Baggett. Appreciate you. So let me keep going here. Yet the distinguishing feature of this age, talking also about the combination of like the overconfidence of the pre-World War I time, as well as the exhaustion by the 1930s. We've got both of those things going on. So the feature of this age is a combination of that creates this moral disunity with unprecedented technological leverage. We're the only generation to be this messed up as a people, in the sense that we don't know how many genders there are, what bathrooms to go to, or what teams kids can play on, because gender is a construct, and there's 1,000 different genders and all that kind of stuff. I'm just saying, not you in the audience here. I'm saying just in general, like people have bought into these ideas. And we are also the same generation that has created so many weapons of mass destruction that we could obliterate not only our planet, but probably every other planet in the solar system. We have a lot of weapons here. And it just seems like we are at the most morally vacant, yet at the same time, the most powerful. So there's a number of these dichotomies we're going to come across that don't seem to add up. So we'll keep going. At present, the globalists are, for example, the United Nations and all their appendages, the World Economic Forum and all of its appendages, the World Trade Organization, the International Monetary Fund, World Bank, European Union, and et cetera, et cetera. There's over 300 international organizations that are doing everything they can every day to strengthen globalization. And the only way to strengthen globalization is to diminish national sovereignty. So this international body gets more powerful, the nation state gets weaker, because they subject themselves to, whatever these rules are by these unelected people from this international collective group of people meeting for whatever reason, whether it's economic or geopolitical or diplomatic or whatever. They have agendas, and their agendas supersede your nation states agendas, right? And for the United States, it's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that's the way it was designed to be. But because we're also the biggest and the most powerful nation that's ever existed to date, there has been in place since the 1940s or since the end of the World War II, this idea to always kind of keep us leashed, right, caged in. And they call this the liberal rules-based order. And some of it is tied back to 1648, to the Treaty of Westphalia, where, that's at the end of the 30 Years' War, and in the various provinces there in Germany, or what is now today Germany, kind of came to some kind of a peace agreement. And in that peace agreement was this idea that each state was sovereign in and of itself and had the right to pursue whatever it wanted to, so long as it didn't mess with anybody else's sovereignty. And so that was going on, and that's the way things have kind of been. And it seems like once the U.S. was now the big kid on the block, the unchallenged superpower, they want to put all these kind of constraints on you. So imagine Superman is fighting all these bad guys, finally wins, and he's finally kind of the king of the hill. And they go over there and they said, hey, we know you're the most powerful, but to make us feel safer, we want to put these kryptonite bracelets on you so that you're just kind of back to like a normal human. And so that's been the way it's been. That's been the way it is for the last 50, 70 years up until Trump. And I wouldn't even say his first term. The second term was, we are a superpower, we're going to start acting like one. And if I posted the Marco Rubio speech there at the security conference in Munich, and I thought it was a great speech. Like, I mean, I thought in terms of laying out why we just should be proud of who we are. We should not be ashamed of who we are. And it resonated to the point where he got a standing ovation at the end, a very loud one. And, but one of the things that he said that was prophetic in there, and why I posted it, was that he called the United States a child of Europe. We'll always be a child of Europe. And I immediately went back to Daniel's, chapter 2, to the statue and the feet. And we'll get to that in a little bit. All right. I know I'm just kind of going off on a rant here about this, but I nerd out on this kind of stuff. So we have all of these international groups. They're fighting for the old world order, but they're kind of grudgingly accepting the reality that things are changing. And so they're trying to get a handle and trying to get ahead on all of these digital currencies, the central bank digital currencies. They're trying to get some way that they're positioned so that they benefit from this before everybody else does. When this crisis comes, when whatever financial crisis comes, and everybody has to just adopt whatever this new system is, you're going to lose a lot, right? It's going to be very painful up front. I'm not saying that's happening today, tomorrow, this year. We don't know when this financial crisis is going to come. And it may come on the heels of another crisis. It may come on the heels of the rapture. It may come on the heels of something else. So, but when this does, I guarantee you those international elite, they are now in the process of getting themselves positioned so that when that transition takes over, they're not going to lose anything. In fact, they probably will gain money in this whole transaction of going completely digital, all the currencies going digital. So, but at the present, the globalists, and I mentioned the list of those guys, are fighting for centralized governance over commerce and technology, yet they are behind the venture capitalist technocrat types like Musk and Thiel and all these other groups, Palmer Luckey, etc. And they are racing. The technocrat types have linked themselves with the populist again. So technocrats throughout history will go back and forth to one political party over the other, whoever is going to benefit them the most. And, for the last 20 years or so, the technocrats had largely been in the pockets of the Democrats, or vice versa. And they, were big donors to the Obamas, to the Clintons, and on and on and on. And now it seems like they have now jumped ship over to the populist Republican side, not just the Republican side, but the populist side of the Republican Party, and Donald Trump's parts, section of it. And so he has basically unleashed them to run as fast as they can, because he knows that if China, Russia, whoever gains artificial general intelligence first, that system they create is going to take over every other system, and it's going to get rid of any threat that it possibly could. Now, is it AGI or ASI, artificial superintelligence? I don't know. I don't know which one of those. I mean, we expect general to happen first, but at the rate things are going, we may already have AGI present. I know Musk has said the singularity has already started. So I don't know. And I will just say this, and this is completely, it's sort of germane to what's going on, but so I have been for the last 2 years earnestly trying to make a t-shirt design. And this is what Lisa and I were talking about earlier for Rev 310. And I was trying to get the 4 horsemen in Sailor Jerry style of art, which is like that old Americana tattoo art, for the simple fact that I didn't want it to be like this big like sticker that goes on the shirt and then it like you wear it and then it's like sweaty and stuff. I wanted it to be something that could be silk screened in. So I needed a simple design that still kind of popped out. And it's going to be the 4 horsemen, but it's like a rock concert shirt, right? So the 4 horsemen world tour. Anyways, so I tried doing that for 2 years, and I could not get the AI art generator thing to make the 4 horsemen. I mean, they would come out very Picasso-like, the horse would look normal here, but then the legs would fade off into smoke or something. It was just like I couldn't get it done. And then tonight I just put it in and it worked. So that's how much I know personally that the AI has moved that fast in terms of like, I'm telling you, and I had tried across Grok, Claude, I tried across all of them. I could not get them to make this 4 horsemen. They'd either give me 5, they'd give me 4 horsemen, but 3 riders. They would mess the colors up. And even after very explicit instructions, like how exactly they do it, couldn't get it. I could not get it done. And tonight I did it. And so I don't know what batch we're on now, what version of AI is out there now, but Carillion says with 5 legs. Yeah. Yeah. You remember the old AI images where like people had, they were smiling. It's like a party, like a Polaroid shot, people it kind of looks like a real photo, except when you scroll in on the teeth, it's like they've got, 83 teeth or something. It's just like, what? Or the extra fingers and stuff. So yeah. Anyways, very frustrating. But tonight I was like, whoa, that just worked. So then as soon as I got it, I sent it out. All right. Where was I? I rabbit trailing myself all the time. So at present, the latter talking about the technocrats, populist side, and not just in the United States, but in South America and in Europe, it seems to be gaining momentum. And so it seems like the technocrats at this point have the advantage of being on the winning side. So if institutional revival were achieved, if Trump was able to make America great again in all the ways that he's talking about, is that whatever that is, whatever state of nationhood that is, that we come to where we consider like he's made everything great again. It is temporary at best. I mean, when I say temporary, I mean momentary, because we know, according to 1 Thessalonians 5:3, that when they say peace and safety, when they think they've achieved or arrived at whatever state the world is going to be in at that point, then sudden destruction comes upon them. Now, I know that Marco Rubio is a Christian. I know that other people in his cabinet are Christians, and they have a general understanding, at least in a very broad sense. And some may have better understanding than others. Like Huckabee, I think, is probably, aware of things like the rapture and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, he's very pro-Israel, so he understands the prophetic and the biblical significance of Israel in these last days. But they're still thinking in their mind that that's way off and they can fix this and get this done and make the next 20 years better than the last 20 years. And that's admirable. I don't look, I don't begrudge anybody wanting to pay less taxes or be hassled less by the government. I would love that. I mean, I would love no taxes and not to be hassled by anybody, let alone the government. And I think that at least in those two areas, we have a lot of common ground with a lot of people. And it's a popular message. It's not just popular in America. It's popular in Argentina. It's popular in Honduras. No, is it Nicaragua or Honduras? Wherever the new president is. I think it's El Salvador. I think it is. Various countries in Europe. Poland, I mean, is just on fire right now, man. They are just like, hey, we're Christian unapologetically, and we don't want any of your immigrants. Like, too bad. And we're not taking them. Same thing with Austria. I think it's Hungary. And I heard that the Netherlands and Italy were also beginning to boot out immigrants. So I don't know. There is definitely a change in the zeitgeist. It feels like the populist kind of movement is gaining momentum over there. So all that to say, even if all that stuff changes and they were able to reverse immigration 1,000%, kick all of the Pakistanis out of England and back to Pakistan and do all the stuff that they want to do, there's no, even if that were to happen, we know that it's going to be fleeting. I mean, very fleeting. All right. Crisis conditions create psychological openness to sweeping paradigm shifts, from the natural to the supernatural, the significant cosmological redefinitions of what does it mean to be in the are we alone in the universe kind of question. So let me read that again. Crisis conditions create psychological openness to sweeping paradigm shifts. COVID 2020, people bought into all sorts of silly ideas. They thought that standing 6 feet apart was going to curb the tide, whatever the phrase was back then. Wearing this little paper mask that had, holes coming out everywhere. All the silly stuff that we had to live through. People were willing to accept it because they think that they're in a moment of crisis. Same thing with 9/11. What we've allowed the government to do to us since 9/11 is shameful. Spanish flu, World War II. Just think about any kind of crisis moment in time, and people are willing to accept things they normally wouldn't accept because it is it comes veiled in crisis, whatever this agenda is going to be. The generation now living, talking about today, is therefore historically unique in possessing both the infrastructure and the conditions necessary for global reordering and governance. And what I meant by that is that not only do we live in the only time where one government could theoretically take over the entire universe, or the universe, the planet, we're also the only ones that are able to do the reordering on a global scale, and all the logistics and all the communications. I mean, this couldn't have been done in any other generation. Could you imagine them trying to create a global government in, say, the 1920s when Woodrow Wilson when they created the League of Nations? They would have loved to have done it. The U.S. Congress at the time would not support it, so we ended up not joining. But Woodrow Wilson could have had his way, man, we'd all been under one system back then. But then, something happens to him, he gets taken out healthcare wise, and his wife ends up kind of running the presidency for the last year, and then they have the elections. So God has a way of tweaking things from going too far too fast and going back to the timeline that he's adjusted and he's set from before the foundation of the world. But my point is that in times of crisis, people will accept things they normally would not accept. Now, the paradox in all of that is going back to the Tower of Babel. Every time mankind has tried to unite, hook, crook, or nook, whoever it's by, force, by whatever, think about the Khans, the Mongols. They conquered more of the world than any other empire, and yet they couldn't keep it together. Alexander the Great, the Romans. The Romans couldn't even conquer Scotland. So, and to my knowledge, Ireland. So they weren't that powerful. So this is the only generation where this could be done, and it would be done digitally. And in that way, with the amount of surveillance satellites, and now with the capability to mass produce drones for not only warfare, but for surveillance and for any other kind of operation, logistics and stuff. We're the only generation that has that, to reorder the world in order to form a global governance and then maintain that governance, sustain it. We're the only generation that could have done it. But I want to go back to 1910, and there was a book that was written by Norman Angell, or Angell, I don't know how you say his last name, and it's called The Great Illusion. And in this book, he was arguing that modern industrial economies are so financially and commercially interdependent that war between any of these great powers would be economically self-destructive. Therefore, even for the victor. So therefore, war is basically extinct. So he wrote the book in 1910, but then it was begin to get really popular by 1913, and very popular, like a New York Times bestseller in our day. So everybody was reading this, talking about how capitalism was going to put war away forever. And then the very next year, World War I breaks out. So this is a quote from Anatoly Kaletsky. I came across this years and years ago. I love the simplicity of it, but he writes, in early 1914, though it seemed impossible that Britain and France would go to war with Germany to defend Russia against Austria-Hungary over a dispute with Serbia, yet by June 28th, war moved straight from impossible to inevitable without ever passing through improbable. 4 years later, 10 million people had died. And that's from his article, World War I. First war was impossible, then inevitable. And I love that. I love the fact that he points out the obvious, that things can go from impossible to inevitable without ever going through improbable. And just how quickly things can change. And look how quickly the German Empire, well, at least the Third Reich under Hitler, look how fast and how powerful they became in just 6 years. They came to office in 1933, and by 1939, they were invading Poland. So, yeah, things can happen very quickly. So I do think there's a gap in time after the rapture. I do think that's the global crisis. And if we're in the time frame that we think we're in, which I think we are, and John Bellum has got a good article coming out Wednesday called 1933. I encourage everybody to read it, but it's talking about a lot of the same stuff. But yeah, I think things can happen very, very rapidly. So let's talk about the fourth turning point here real quick. And for that, I have a chart. Let me go through them real quick. So in the fourth turning framework, you have, how many stages do you have? 4 stages. You have the crisis, the high stage, the awakening, and then the unraveling. And the unraveling goes right back into the crisis. And these are typically about every 20 to 25 years. And then in each of those 20 to 25-year blocks, you have these archetypes. These are the dominant personality types that people kind of take on. And you have the prophet, the nomad, the hero, and the artist. And then those also coincide, and I'll show you too, where they coincide with the industrial revolutions and why those are important and how they factor into all this. Okay, so let me show you that. Let's see. There you go. And share screen. All right. At the bottom, there's the differences in the industrial revolutions. So they're just kind of labeled 1 IR, 2 IR, 3 IR, 4 IR, and that's what they stand for. And that's the general time frames that they were dominant, in terms of the way things were in their reality. So think back to the 80s, where you could go to Montgomery Ward's and pick a brand, I don't know, some jeans or clothes or whatever, and then you're in the mall, and so down the mall you go to get some other place that doesn't exist anymore. But anyways, the point I'm saying is that at that time, you're thinking, well, Montgomery Ward's will be here forever, or Sears, or because that's reality at that time, right? Sears is going to be there forever. I think it's just a catalog now, if I'm not mistaken. It may not even be anything anymore. But I can remember 20 different stores off the top of my head that don't exist anymore, but they were just a staple in my life. And not only just stores, but think about countries, think about movie stars or phenomena that had happened at that time, or what have you. And that just seemed like reality. And yet at the same time, we look back on it, and those things have just long since faded, and just, where did they go, kind of thing. All right. So we have this goes back a little earlier than I wanted to, and I don't want to spend any time on those things specifically, but you have the missionary generation, 1860 to 1882. That's also part of I talked about the phases of the empire. We were still in that manifest destiny phase where soil, land equals power, and we were just expanding west, and whatever you could put a fence on, you put a fence on it and claimed it. And we had the Louisiana Purchase, we had the all the wars with the Indians back then, the tribes, the nations, and they lost land, they were conquered, et cetera, et cetera. So that was that manifest destiny time. Then you have the lost generation from 1883 to 1900. They were born in that time period, so that's still under manifest destiny, and they're still part of the first industrial revolution. And that first industrial revolution is, basically everything was powered by water, steam, coal, wood, or wood power. And now we're moving toward the end of that second industrial, or the first industrial revolution, into the second industrial revolution, right around the turn of the 20th century. And this is where the national focus went away from manifest destiny, because now we had conquered from shore to shore, with the exception of like Alaska and Hawaii. We went in, or I don't know, when did we get Alaska? When was Seward's Folly? Was it the 1950s? I know we got the Hawaii in the 1950s, but when was Alaska? So anyhow, we went to this blue water Navy as the form of our power projection. We recognized that there was vast markets out there, and just like a century earlier, the East India Company and the British, is it the British East India Company? They were like they were like the Google of their day. They were the economics powerhouse. 1867, thank you. So Alaska was Seward's Folly, and then the Louisiana Purchase, and then the land that we got from Spain. So all that to say was manifest destiny was take as much land as you could, claim it, own it, make it American. Blue Water Navy, it changed our focus. We wanted to be able to trade. We went to China, or went to Japan, basically made them open their ports, and we really began expanding our reach throughout the world. That also tied in with the Americas, the whole Monroe Doctrine from the 1823. The next generation, the GI generation, 1901, 1924. Again, the Navy is still part of this, and they're part of the hero archetype.
and they're born during this period of crisis. So we had World War I, or at that time it was called the Great War. And it was called the Great War because at that time, nobody had ever seen a war like that big, that massive, and that many people dying in it. So it really was, in terms of shock value, generational shock value. I mean, it was the Great War. And, there was so much change happening in that war. They said that you could ride in on one side of that war on horseback and ride out on the other in a tank, with a plane overhead. And so there was very, very rapid military and technological advancements happening at that time. So then we go to the silent generation, 1925 to 1942. Again, the Blue Water Navy, and now at least for the previous, since 1900, we've been in this industrial revolution, second industrial revolution. So now you got the everything is put on the electric grid, steel, rail expansion, mass production, as well as the Blue Water Navy. So again, we were beginning to industrialize our economic base in a way that, by applying something as simple as electricity to that opened all kind. That was revolutionary in its own right, and then we have the baby boomer generation, so 43 to 60, and now at this point, from the end of World War II, the focus went away from the Blue Water Navy as the force of power projection now to influence and economic influence. Really economic domination at first, and then influence, and then necessity. It's kind of how that's gone over the course of that time, from the 40s, where we had the Bretton Woods plan, the Marshall Plan, MacArthur's plan to rebuild Japan. All the stuff that was happening at that time was really on the back of the United States in terms of economic power and being able to finance all this stuff, as well as, donating the land like through the United Nations and NATO, using the bulk of our forces for NATO, and really kind of shoring up all of these kind of international institutions. And that's where that influence comes in. We wanted the dollar to be the reserve currency. And we did. We made it so that if you wanted to buy oil, this gets solidified in the 70s, but we wanted the dollar to be the reserve currency. It was the most stable currency on the planet at that time. So at the same time, you have decolonialization. Britain, France, Germany, the Netherlands, anybody that had colonies abroad were beginning to shutter those colonies. And then you had a bunch of crop of new nations coming out of those that declared their independence in the 40s, 50s, 60s. And then on top of all of that, you had the carving up of the Middle East that happened right after World War I. So a lot of new nations are coming forth in this time period. Of note, Israel, right? 1948. First time they'd been a nation since the 70 AD, since the Romans destroyed them. So that, even though Israel came a nation in 1948, that simple act of them becoming a nation didn't happen in a vacuum. While all that other stuff I just talked about was going on, you had in 1897 the first Zionist Congress in Europe by Theodore Herzl. You had the Balfour Declaration in 1917 by Lord Balfour, basically legalizing a pathway for Jewish immigrants to migrate back to their ancient homeland. And then the San Remo Conference, partitioning of the land between the Arab state and the Jewish state, and on and on. And then there was a bunch of betrayals, right, by the British and by basically everybody else, the United States. And then you have World War II. And at the end of that, I guess the collective guilt was such that there was enough votes in the United Nations for them to actually solidify that partitioning of an Arab and Jewish state, allowing for Israel to claim their ancient homeland, reclaim their place in the world as a nation state, which they did on May 14th, 1948. So that date happened, but it didn't happen in a vacuum, right? So all the while, all this stuff is going on in the world, the prophetic stuff is still moving forward. God's plan is still moving forward. It's not wavered. It's not changed. Irrespective of what's happening in the world, it's still making its way to fulfillment, prophetic fulfillment. From there, we have Generation X. This was 1961 to 81, my generation. So again, we're in this period of economic dominance where the U.S. dollar is king, cash is king, you know what they used to say. We're now into the third industrial revolution. So now electronics are being added into the marketplace. They're being added into the corporate work, the blue collar work. Things are becoming mechanized in a way that they had not been through electronics. And then there was also at the end of the third industrial revolution, we actually have, you know, the computer coming out and with things moving in that the embryonic internet at that time, you know, back, because that goes back to the 60s with ARPA, which is the predecessor to DARPA. But they created a form of the internet, right? And so it didn't obviously take root. It was being used, but it wasn't commercialized to the public until like the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. So, and then you have, for that generation, my generation, we're called the nomads. And then that's the awakening. And that's the 20-year kind of window there. And then the crisis for that time period, it was the Cold War realignment, and then eventually the Gulf War. Now, I really wanted to focus on these kind of last three because these are where things are starting to get, this is where things start to get wonky, right? So we have the millennials in 1982 to 2004, Homeland or Gen Z, they're 2005 to 2024. And then I think they're Gen Alpha, if I'm not mistaken, but they're, you know, obviously from 25 on, right? And so around 2004, even into our present day, we're starting to see this massive shift in terms of the triangle. The old world order is still there, but it's becoming less and less, right? And the new world order, or the new world disorder, is now becoming and gaining more and more prominence. And this is what they had been trying to stave off until they were positioned for this the switch to be flipped, and for them to gain everything. They didn't want to lose anything, right? Their wealth. So we're in the third industrial revolution, the hero phase. We're in the unraveling. Things are starting to fall apart. It's like that William Butler Yeats quote, poem, you know, the falconer, the falcon can no longer hear the falconer, and the spot widening gyre is getting wider and wider, and things fall apart. Where that's really that's what this is talking about, from 82 to 2004. And it doesn't feel like that, does it? It doesn't feel like things fell apart. It felt like everything was changing. Everything was constantly changing. And culturally, everything was changing every couple of years. Some new type of music was out, some new cultural phenomena, some new clothing line, some new, you know, it was all, and it started all moving faster and faster. And then the internet came out around the same time the grunge came out, at the same time that all these other kind of sweeping changes started happening. So the 90s were incredibly turbulent, the .com, you know, and all that. You had the fall of communism, the fall of the Iron Curtain in 89, 87 or 89. I think it was 89. And then the collapse of the Soviet Union in 91. And then, so the Iron Curtain goes down, you have European reunification. And at the same time, this guy we've been propping up in the Middle East for 9 years against the Iranians, he ends up invading Kuwait. So that was Saddam Hussein. So now the U.S. is sucked back into the Middle East. And so it was, you know, we look back on it and it doesn't seem that turbulent in hindsight, given everything we're going through today. But at that time, you know, it was turbulent for them. So I remember in 93 or 94, I was in a unit in Germany and nobody had a computer. I mean, not just in my unit, but in the whole battalion. The only people that had a computer was in the motor pool, and the motor pool was it was one of those like green computers, with or no, it was a black screen with the green, the DOS, is that what it's called? DOS. And it wasn't connected to anything outside of the motor pool. So it was just like for like storing things down, and you could print out the sheets with the perforated edges on both sides, the old printer style. So anyways, that's my only exposure to like a computer. And then by the 97, I'm going back to college, and I'm getting shown around, by this guy, the first day of college, and he's kind of taking me around the university, showing me stuff, and he's going, yeah, hey, we're gonna have a party or something later. Just I'll email you, the time and place. And I was like, I had this kind of weird look on my face. I was like, what do you mean? What is email? I was like, what is that? And he looked at me like I was a troglodyte. Like I was like, where have you been hiding? I was like, I've been in Germany in the army. Like we didn't have any of this stuff. So like, what is email? So he took me in the library and took me to a computer and showed me. He's like, hey, this is your email address. And so he walked me all through that like I was 5. But anyways, that was my first exposure to like that stuff. That was in 97. So I think kind of most Americans that weren't living in big urban areas were probably in similar boats where you're somewhat exposed to it. I mean, you got to think like nowadays you don't even have to like pull out your wallet or anything. You just put your phone up next to a thing, and it pulls the data off your card from your phone, or you can tap it with your card. Or I think people are paying with their eyeballs now, or fingerprints, the little chip in their hand. Like there's 1,000 different ways to pay for stuff now, and it's just. That was unheard of then. Even if you were to take dollar bills, like anything that's been printed in the last, 10 years, 15 years, and take it back to the 90s and try to cash that money back then, they would have been immediately flagged as fraudulent currency because they look so different. They got strips of them now, and they're holographic, and they, all that stuff. So, all right, millennials, unraveling the great unraveling that culminated, I guess, with the 9/11, and a few years after that, the financial crisis we had. But that whole time period, we kind of had the two big crises happening at the same time. 9/11 happened in 2001, and then the financial crisis of 2008. And then on top of that, we had Katrina. We had all these kind of big natural disasters in that time. The massive earthquake in the Indian Ocean, Haiti. Oh, no, that Haiti was in 2010. Yeah, we had those later, but the big one in the Indian Ocean, I can't remember the Sumatra earthquake. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong on that. I think like 300,000 people had died in that. Yeah, AOL. You have mail. Dungeon Siege. I've never played that. There was one guy in my unit in Germany that had a computer. It wasn't linked to anything, and he had just one game on it. And I guess it was some kind of a castle game. And I went to his room one time, and I was kind of floored by it. I was looking at it like it was the most powerful computer on the planet, because it's really the only one I'd ever seen, in recent memory. I'm sorry, Yvonne. Not my intention. So, okay. Where were we? And then Gen Alpha. So now this new generation, things have shifted again. And it's a noticeable shift for the second Trump administration, because now, going back to the whole idea of influencing people financially through our money, making the dollar the reserve currency, making it the petrodollar, making it the counter to BRICS, the basket of currencies, all that. We have so much debt piled onto our currency now, people don't trust it any longer. And, I think this administration is forward thinking. I'll give them that much, at least, that they are now, they're looking at our current dilemma with the dollar much in the same way that the Saudis are looking at oil, in terms of their power projection. They know that oil is not going to be there forever. They also know that technology is moving cars away from oil. So they are trying to diversify their income streams back into Saudi Arabia, just like most other countries are trying to do that now. They're trying to adjust to this new reality, which is that whoever develops artificial intelligence first is going to control everything. Same thing with quantum supremacy. Whoever gets that quantum supremacy first is going to hold all the secrets to everybody. There's nothing anybody's going to be able to hide from them. And they're going to have leverage over everyone. So either of those scenarios are not good, which is why Trump has taken the leashes off these technocrats and are letting them just run as fast as they can. At the same time that many of these senior technocrats are leaving because they feel incredibly uncomfortable or unsafe with how fast things are moving and how powerful these systems are becoming. And that's part of that tension that we feel right now. And we're in this in-between place between the way things used to be and the way things are rapidly moving into. And on one side of it, it's the America that we kind of remember, or whatever country you're in, the way that it used to be. It's kind of like the way it was at 9/11. I mean, there was the way flying and going on a flight before 9/11, and then there's the way it was after. And the way it was before, I mean, like if I'm coming back on a flight, my kids can come all the way to the where I get off the plane. They used to be able to go all the way there and just greet me there. And now all that's changed. They can't get past security. So that's the way things are about to become with artificial intelligence. It's going to be that fundamental of a change where, and I'm not trying to say that artificial intelligence is smart or that it is intelligent. I'm simply saying that the artificial part of it is the key word there. That's artificially intelligent. It's able to amass and compute vast amounts of data very quickly. And to whatever degree they're giving these things autonomy to, machine learning to learn on their own, this is only going to get exponentially faster and faster. So I see what Klaus Schwab said a few years ago. He was calling this a multi-crisis or polycrisis. And I think he's right on that, because we're looking at crises across so many different kinds of domains. It's becoming very like cognizant dissonance, in the sense that we know that there's something very terrible, but at the same time, we can't really do anything about it. So what do? This whole thing with the Epstein files. And I don't want to get too much into this, but there's something like 6 million pages. And the reason, and this is just a theory, but the reason I think that Trump did not want to open this can of worms this early was because of what happened to him in his first term. He came in on his first term, and basically he had the core group of people around him, but everybody else was establishment. So they're at the end of 8 years of Obama, and they just presumed that Hillary Clinton would win. So he had a very hostile administration across not just Congress and the media, but even within the executive branch and within the FBI, within everybody that could betray him, betrayed him, or tried to, even Steve Bannon. And so the thing I fear with, or not that I fear, but the thing that I noticed with him coming in the second time, after everything that's happened, the first thing he does is he takes out USAID, because he knows that's the main money spigot where all of this deep state money goes through to fund everything else. So then he starts going after the different agencies. He starts rooting out all the corruption in these agencies through Doge. And then he starts making these policies and setting these policies in place like, hey, we're not going to extend your contracts. So if you work for the government and you're contracted through this year, when that contract ends, you're gone. We're not firing you. We're just not renewing your contract. That's going to take out a large swath of people. People retiring early, people that were forced out because they were non-performers. I mean, he's cleaning house. And the thing with all of this is, it's like you peel off one layer of the Band-Aid, and it's like the wound is worse than there. And then you clean that wound up, and underneath that is something. And it's like you keep finding more and more I think he was really trying to get a handle on all of this stuff first before he opened that can of worms. But, it is as it is. He's mentioned in there, but he is not complicit to anything or any of the travel. So what we're starting to notice now from the media and from leftist groups, Democrats, etc., is they're leaning into all of this negativism in social media, saying that it's all the billionaire class. They're all evil. They're all elite, Luciferian elites. They're all that. Well, who does Trump's a billionaire. Who does he have a lot of his people in this position in cabinets? Very wealthy, successful businessmen. Now, most of them, I think one of them is mentioned in there, Lutnick. I don't think anybody else is, to my knowledge, that is complicit in anything. So now this is going to take precedence, and this is going to potentially hijack the next 3 years of his administration dealing with the fallout, because it's so systemic and so widespread. Now, do I think every one of those people that were on the planes and going to the islands and going to the ranch and doing all that stuff with Jeffrey Epstein, I think they should be locked in prison forever and throw away the key into very hostile prisons for those kind of people. And they should just be put in general population. That's what I think. But, I don't know all the different dynamics that's going to happen. Do I think that there will be massive high profile arrests? I do think that there will be, because I think that he's going to have to arrest him, or he's going to have a civil war in his hand. People are going to be pissed, and they're going to rise up, and they're just going to, he doesn't want that. He doesn't want the summer of love again from the right and the left. I mean, he expects it from the left, but not from the Tea Party types. So I do think that there will be reckonings. There's too much dirt. I think he would have to expand the DOJ. He would have to bring in these massive amounts of law firms, and all those law firms would have to be vetted for cross ties to the Obamas, the Clintons, to making sure those folks are weeded out, or there's no history between those organizations. I'm sure, like John Haller would probably know that there was a lot of other law firms, like Jay Sekulow and all the groups and associates associated with him and his Christian legal friends, in that sense, that there's a lot of people that would do the work. It's so massive. This is gonna, we're just getting the tip of the iceberg, and some of the stuff that's come out is absolutely horrific. And I don't know if I just think back to what Jesus said. It'd be better if they had had a stone tied around their neck and sunk to the bottom of the ocean for what they're doing to children. So, okay. So that's the chart, and basically where we are today. We have a bunch of overlapping stages that we're in, and things feel very discombobulated, if I can put it that way. Things feel very much off kilter, and I feel like that's part of why, Glenn Beck, I was listening to him the other day. He brought up something that was interesting that I hadn't thought about. He was talking about these powers. Every time in history there's been a rising power, there's always been a descending power. So think back to the Babylonians. They're conquered by the Medo-Persians. The Medo-Persians rule for a while, but then the Greeks become the dominant force in the Middle East and the Far East around the 300s. Philip of Macedon and then his son Alexander the Great basically changed the Middle East. They changed all of that for centuries. And then Alexander dies, his 4 generals take over: Ptolemy, Seleucus, Lydian. I can't remember who the other one is, but they will be. They took over from there. They split the kingdom into 4, and then they ruled until the Romans came in and dominated everything. So it seems like every time there's a descending power, there's always a rising power, vice versa. And we live at a time now where there is no rising or there's no descending or ascending power. It's just like everything is like this the whole time. And then I go back again to Daniel chapter 2, to the feet. The feet are mixed miry clay with iron, and they don't adhere to one another. Yet there's some strength in them, and then they just can't keep it together. And I think that we're in the feet right now, where we're experiencing all this kind of incredible turbulence that is going to be solidified. I think what we'll see after the rapture in the toes. So, yeah, Glenn Beck's Mormon. I hate that he's got such a sharp mind. I can't believe he doesn't turn that investigative skill that he has into exploring his own faith. Jack says, America will be judged. Yep, every nation is going to be judged. Jeremiah 30, 7-11. Heinz Pilot says, I think the beast system is the next to rise. There's no way this goes on for years. Too much has happened now, and we're getting near the end of the olive tree generation. Yep, I 100,000% agree. Judy says, America will be judged because of Trump dividing up Israel. Well, he wasn't the first president to do that. George H.W. Bush, fellow Texan, I'm deeply ashamed of that he divided up and gave Gaza to the Palestinians, the Arabs, whatever they are. Obviously, Obama was hostile to Israel. The Clintons were hostile to Israel. So it wasn't just Trump. I mean, if we're going to be judged, we're going to be judged across the board for everything we did to Israel, good and bad. When is your book coming out with Terry James? Becky asked. I finished my edits on there. I had to go back and fix all the citations and stuff. And so that's all done. So the editor has it now. So she's working through it. So I'm hoping to have it by March before we go to the conference in Las Vegas. So yeah. All right. Well, that's kind of what I was talking about tonight. There is some parallels between 1914, 1939, and the way things are today. I think you guys have gotten the gist of what I was going to go through on that. Bottom line, with the bottom line with all those is that, we're at this point of like peak technological advancements, yet we're morally bankrupt. We are generationally confused. Yet we have the capacity today for planetary unification, given the right crisis. Yet we can't get along. We can't get along to save our lives. So we're in this weird place these days, and I'm thankful that God allowed us to be here. I think it's cool that we're seeing more prophecy being fulfilled in our day than they've seen in nearly 2,000 years. So not only that, but we are the generation to see Christ return. We don't know exactly when that's going to be, but we know it's soon. We're coming up on the 2000th anniversary of his death, burial, and resurrection. And if history holds true, if the pattern holds true in Scripture, 2,000 years from Adam to Abraham, 2,000 years from Abraham to Jesus' first coming. Now again, here we are. Hey, thank you, Deborah. Appreciate you. So yeah, so I'm not cheerleading anything. I'm not cheerleading Trump. He's made plenty of mistakes. He's going to answer for those mistakes. I don't believe he's a Christian. Yet at the present, he's somewhat friendly to Christians. He's friendly to Israel. He has basically cut off the flow of human trafficking at the border, fentanyl, all that stuff, which I'm thankful for. All those guys, they're all doing what they think is right. And I don't mean just the general politicians, the rhinos and whatnot. I mean just in general, like Ted Cruz or Ronnie Jackson. These guys feel like what they're doing is they're trying to preserve the country they live in for their children. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's not what's going to happen, but that's nothing wrong for them to believe that. They grow up in whatever faith they grow up into, whether they teach on prophecy or they don't, or they take an allegorical view approach to prophecy, et cetera, et cetera. That's unfortunate, but that's kind of the way things are in the world we live in today. So he did fire that religious advisor. I think she was like Miss California. She's some faith council. She ended up being like really anti-Semitic or anti-Israel, and they just booted her off the team. So it's good. I mean, we almost had Kamala Harris and Tim Walz as our leaders right now. We would have the Board of Truth, or what would they call it? What was they were going to start some type of board, Ministry of Truth or something like that, to weed out hate speech on all social media. Not Paula White. I forget the lady's name, but she was like super cringe and like, I don't know, super weird lady. But I remember she was on. They were posting her videos on Twitter back when it was still Twitter. But okay, the Ministry of Truth, yeah. Daniel 2:41 through 43. Whereas you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, yet the strength of the iron shall be in it, just as you saw the iron mixed with the ceramic clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly fragile. As you saw iron mixed with ceramic clay, they will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, just as iron does not mix with clay. What that last part is, I have no idea, but I would not be surprised if that somehow ties in with disclosure, which is coming, I think, this summer. And from what I understand, they're already here. These fallen angels masquerading as aliens or lizard people or Nordics or whatever there's all these different classes of these. I know I've seen videos of people where their eyes are blinking sideways like a lizard or something. And it's just like, it's not staged. It's just the way that they was caught. And those videos have been scrutinized. They can't explain it. Like, we don't know how that is. This is even videos from back in the 90s and earlier stuff before AI and before all the Adobe Photoshopping and all that kind of stuff. It's super weird. And I guarantee you, if in the Hebrews it says that we, be careful, we've entertained angels unaware at times. Who's to say that these fallen angels haven't taken that and run with it and basically carved out whole lives, acting like humans down here in the deep state, the head of the Rothschilds, all those kind of, you never know. Well, hey, Frosty Gal, you made it. Ghost to a ghost. Yeah, I've seen those. It's freaky. Their pupils change to slits. Yeah. Sling and Stone is a Christian prophecy channel most of you guys probably are familiar with, but he had a long video on this the other night, a couple nights ago, maybe a week ago, and just clip after clip, and you just performers on stage and their faces getting contorted like in just unnatural ways. It's super bizarre. If ladies' fingers seem like they're growing, like they're like unnaturally long. Anyways, I don't want to give anybody nightmares, but I keep thinking back to the feet, and then what Rubio said at the speech the other day, that we were a child of Europe. We will always be a child of Europe. And I was just thinking, man, so we are. He is, from a third most powerful man in the world, from his position, vantage point, still identifies our nation as European. And he went through all the kind of the Scotch, the Germans, the Irish, the Spanish, and all the French and all the different influences that have gone into shaping and making the United States what it is. Even the structure of our our government, being Greco-Roman in terms of how we structure our law, how we structure and formulate our government, Congress, Senate, et cetera. Those are all Roman position or Roman constructs back in the day. So we mixed that with Judeo-Christian ethos and morality, and you basically had the best form of government that you could have. Because right after we had our revolution, the French had a revolution, and theirs was more from a human secular standpoint. And next thing you know, they got guillotines, going happy, guillotine happy. Okie doke. Let me go to. Can't believe I just said okie doke. All right, let's see. Questions. All right. 9:20. Again, thank you guys for hanging out tonight. Got almost 800 in the chat watching. Thank you guys, much appreciated. I think this is the only time I'm on live this week. I was supposed to be on with Vindog tomorrow, but we rescheduled for next week. So I'll be on with him next week, and then a couple of the I filmed with Everything Under the Sun is a channel. I don't know when they'll release that. It may be like a 2-part video I did with them, really long and really good. And then I recorded with JB, so I don't know when he'll publish that. So that'll be out at some point. Okay, from Richard Browder, will Trump attack Iran? I think Trump is bluffing. No, I think he will attack Iran. Let me see if I can find this. And they just released this. You guys probably have seen it. It's just taking its sweet time. There we go. Oh, that's 24. There was something they just released the other day. Anyways, we have a ton of stuff over there right now. Sorry, I couldn't find that exact photo. I think I had saved it as a photo on my phone and never transferred it over. Anyways, yeah, I very similar to what Putin did back in 2022. He amassed all these forces there on the border with Ukraine, and I said then, I was like, that's crazy expensive. That costed a lot of money. It cost us a lot of money to move all those assets there in the Middle East. They're going to do something. They're going to get something out of Iran. It's not going to be for nothing. They didn't waste, tens of billions of dollars just to go bluff against those guys. Something will change militarily. And I think the Iranians, the leadership, the IRGC and all those folks have basically said, yeah, we're not negotiating anything. So I think Trump was just waiting for them to say that so that he could do what he was going to do. Patrick Hart, at the rapture, I wonder why God glorifies our existing bodies, living or deceased, in lieu of an entirely new vessel, something unique in the molecules, DNA perhaps. We don't really know what our new bodies are going to look like. I've always assumed that we would be us, but like the perfect version of us had sin never entered the world. And then on top of that, you know, the glorified status and being immortal, etc., which I think includes not having internal organs. I don't think we'll need internal organs at that point, which means we don't need blood. We'll just be flesh and bone. Which, if you're just flesh and bone, like you could swim to the bottom of the ocean. I mean, there's a lot of things you could do when you're not constrained by internal organs and blood and veins and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know. It makes sense. It's in keeping with this whole concept of renovation, not demolition kind of thing. You know, where the earth is burned with fire, but I think it's a purifying fire, like a purging fire, that the earth will still be here at the end of it. Lee Brainer's book, The New Heavens, New Earth, Renovation or Restoration, he pulls out all the verses talking about the earth, moon, and sun are going to be here forever. So the earth will still be the earth, but it'll be the perfect form of the earth, like it talks about in Romans 8, that all of creation groans, waiting to be liberated from the burden of sin. So I think it's very much in the same vein. If he's not going to completely start over with a new earth, he's not going to start over with a new us. It's just us in the form, the way we were supposed to be, the way it was always intended for us to be. And when you read, I don't know if this is 100%, I have my Bible on me. The passage in Ephesians 2, made to sit in the heavenly places. It seems like, and I'm just, the way I take it is like the moment you get saved, you have this avatar, body, whatever, the perfect version of you is waiting up there, waiting to be brought with your new body or with your old body. And together you guys are, you go from being 80 to being, whatever age, 25, forever, never having all those aches and pains, and being in your new form, the way that God always intended you to be. And not on top of that, but you're also immortal. So Donna, in your opinion, should we worry about Islam? They are not in the Bible, correct? Wouldn't God have warned us, or did he? I personally don't worry about Islam. I do think in my heart of hearts that Islam is going to be dealt with at the Battle of Gog and Magog. And I think that when that clarion call, like the rapture happens, then the Muslims are going crazy. And I think some call is going to go out, and they're going to say, hey, now is the time to take out Israel. And it's just going to be like this. I'm not trying to constrain them to like being bugs, but like, when you turn the light on, all the bugs swarm to it. I think this clarion call is going to be like that for them. And they're going to come from all over, from the south, from the east, from the west. And they're all going to kind of come down and try and overpower Israel. And that's when God steps in and completely wipes them out. And at the end of that, you have this massive vacuum where, Islam is still going to be there, but it's not going to be a militant version of it. It's not going to be any more militant than the Buddhists are, or Zoroastrians, so I don't think it's going to be an Islamic Antichrist or Islamic false prophet or anything. Islam is so pigeonholed itself into monotheism, into Buddha and not Buddha, Muhammad. There's no any more room for anybody else to be worshipped. The Antichrist is going to claim the mantle for himself. Even if this guy comes as the Mahdi, he is at some point he's going to say, hey, you need to worship me, and they're going to turn on him because obviously there's no, and I'm quoting them, they say there's no God but Allah. So when whoever this Antichrist character is in the Holy of Holies and declares himself to be God, if Islam is still a militant force at that point, they should turn on him and be as repulsed as the Jews would be, defiling their Holy of Holies. So they don't have any wiggle room either. All the other religions are mostly polytheistic. Hinduism, Buddhism, Shintoism, Zoroastrianism, all the pagan religions, Wicca, everything else is pretty much polytheistic. Mormonism is polytheistic. The only ones that aren't is Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, which is why we're called the three monotheistic religions. So the true church is taken out. That leaves Israel, and that leaves Islam and an apostate church back here. The Jews, it seems like at that time, are also going to have their third temple. So they're going to be reviving and sticking to their own stuff. Islam is going to try and take out Israel once and for all, that now that the U.S. is distracted, or we're not in the picture at that point. And they're going to make their move, and they're going to get wiped out. And that's going to create another massive vacuum in the world. And that's what I think the beast kingdom fills that, or the mystery Babylon religion fills that void. Oops, sorry. But to answer your question, should we be worried about them now, here and now? I certainly think that if you look at the way they operate and the way they come into a community and begin to slowly take over until they become the majority, I feel like there's a lot of pushback on all that now. We see things go, ebbs and flows, right? And it feels like this has been one long push, but wave coming in. But eventually that wave's going to come back out. And then, it seems like a lot of those leaders in Europe were getting the wake-up call between last year, this year, and everything that's happened in between. Like, dude, you guys are suiciding your civilization. What are you doing? What are you doing? Are you that ashamed of your culture, that you can't try and leave the world a better place for your kids? Anyways, that's a lot of what that speech felt like on Saturday. Just like, dude, you can't be held responsible to what generations past did. We have a proud future, a proud past, a proud future. I mean, we had pilgrims that went out, we had missionaries, we had explorers, we had, all this, that, and the other discoveries, and all the great scientific minds that came out of Europe, Copernicus, Galileo, Isaac Newton, and on and on. It's a culture, according to his speech, it was a culture to be, worthy of having pride in. And I think Europe is going to start waking up, and they are going to be the dominant force on the planet. I don't know if they get AI first, maybe they do, or after the rapture, whatever companies are in the United States. Let's say that it's Google DeepMind is the first thing that really achieves ASI, or whatever they want to call it, this super intelligent system. Well, Google has headquarters in Europe as well. They would just close this headquarters and transfer everything over to there. And then Europe, boom, they would have the most powerful AI system in the world, and they would incorporate that into their government. And then, the US is kind of floundering out here because of the rapture. Russia has been decimated. Turkey, much of the Middle East has been decimated, marching against Israel. And, China, I think China will probably be in some kind of quagmire at that point between now and then, whether it's their own kind of version of civil war or economic collapse or whatever, but they're not really a factor until kind of the second half of the tribulation in terms of them marching against the Antichrist. So they don't seem to be a factor early on. They seem to be dealing with some major issues on their own. Question: do you think that the Epstein files is so well accept a better new leader like the Antichrist? You think releasing all the Epstein files is so well? I don't, Stacey, I'm not, or Panther Gal, I'm not sure what you're asking. I think from a prophetic standpoint, what does any of the Epstein files have to do with anything? There may have been people in these files that had aspirations of potentially they were like Antichrist candidates, that were people that Satan was grooming, for that role. And now their covers have been blown. So now he may have to start over and focus in on some new person or whatever that he didn't originally intend to use, which is why that person is unknown. So that's a thought. Hypno to a Dali, awesome. Hypno. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Do you think the algorithmic division of society on social media is on purpose? Yes. Absolutely. They're doing everything they can to keep us pitted against each other because they don't want us all unified against them. From Jason Garza, if the U.S. gets Greenland, will China get Taiwan? Russia gets Ukraine? I think that there's probably some deals like that going to come out in the not too distant future. So we will get Greenland, and I think we'll also get Cuba, and then parts of Canada. I think Canada's done. They'll collapse into provinces, and they'll just get absorbed into the United States. As far as Taiwan goes, that's an interesting question. I think there may be an issue in China now where, I talked about this a couple of weeks ago about how Xi Jinping disappeared one of his top men in the senior committee that they have. That's 7 of them. It has to be unanimously that any of them get removed. And since Xi did it all he just disappeared this guy. I think I would not be surprised in the next month or so if news doesn't come out that there was a coup in China. They're trying to do a coup, get rid of Xi. So between that and his health and his he's vastly unpopular, even with the military. So he knows that they're not loyal to him. So, and he's not a general, he's not a military leader. So I think China is in a world of hurt right now. I don't know that they get Taiwan. But even if they did, I mean, at that point, the big concern about getting Taiwan is that they would get the number one computer chip maker in the world. And seeing that that's a strategic point of leverage that we don't ever want to be held against or held up by, which is why Trump has pumped all this money into NVIDIA, into Wang, I forget his name, Wang something, into his company, and he's going to champion them until they actually become the dominant chip maker in the world. And at that point, if China does take Taiwan, it's not an existential threat to the United States. I think Chooch is in the audience. What's up, Chooch? I think like North America will be a region. So if it is the 10 horns, the 10 crowns, and 7 heads, I think that those would be regions with leaders appointed to govern them. So it says they're kings without kingdoms. And they rule 1 hour with the beast, and they have one mind. Whoever these guys are, I think, are going to be chipped up, with the mark of the beast chip, and they're going to be able to communicate probably telepathically or some way that is unique to just them. Like I think the mark of the beast chip itself you'll have like the normal model, and that normal model may give you like super healing, like it's constantly going through your body, reporting and saying, hey, what's hurt, what's damaged, and trying to fix it with nanotechnology or whatever, however that it's going to work. And it's going to work too well. So by the time that these demonic locusts come out in Revelation, I think it's Revelation 9, verse 6, that people are going to want to die and they can't. So I think that's the basic model. Mark of the Beast chip, which in and of itself, somebody taking that will go from like being an IQ of 120 to being like 400. I mean, it will give them a huge economic and a huge advantage, over just the normal person. The secondary level of those chips may go for more higher leadership, and it may allow them to have those benefits from the first model, the first tier. And now theirs is upgraded to where they are able to communicate telepathically. And then that next level, the Luciferian elite kind of leaders, their chip may have some other superpower, whatever that other folks don't have, they're not privy to, and allows them to communicate directly with the beast or whatever. So I think it'll be done by tiers, because that's how they do everything else. You don't just have one seat on a plane. You have first class, you have business, you have it's like that with everything. Seating, VIP seating, this, that. If there's an advantage to be given, Sky Mile clubs, this model is the top model. Like, I think that the Mark of the Beast will be modeled like that. Okay. Talia. Hey, Talia. Can you please explain heavenly rewards? Should we aim to obtain as many rewards as possible, like the Scouts Badge program? There are 5 crowns, and I have them in my Bible marked out. I don't have my Bible with me. So you have the incorruptible crown, crown of righteousness, the crown of life, the crown of glory, and the crown of rejoicing for believers. So the incorruptible crown is awarded for self-control, discipline, mastering the old nature to live for Christ. Crown of righteousness is given to those who live in anticipation of Christ's return, acting as watchers' rewards. The crown of life is promised to those who endure trials, temptations, persecution, often rewarded as a martyr's crown. Crown of glory awarded to pastors, elders, and leaders who faithfully shepherd God's flock. And then the crown of rejoicing, known as the soul winner's crown, given for sharing the gospel, leading others to Christ. So I don't know. I don't know if there's other crowns other than those, but I also know that I think it's in Luke 12 that it talks about that some will be ruling over certain, 1 city, 5 cities. There's going to be different levels of responsibility given to, I believe, the church, acting as this princely class under the king during the millennial kingdom. So we'll be ruling and reigning with him to whatever degree. And based on your life here now as believers, utilizing the gifts that God's given you, how much of that authority is are you given to rule and reign with Christ? So I think that is the overarching one. The crowns here, though, seem to be, obviously they're specific for different things within the believer's walk. And we see it now, there's a lot of people around the world being persecuted for their faith. We're not being persecuted for our faith here, not in the way they are, not with their lives. So I think that just by default, there's going to be people who are not going to get all 5 crowns. I'm sure that there may be some that can, for whatever reason. They're highly evangelistic, pastor, also martyred, also, mastered the old nature, so there's that. I mean, there's obviously that, but I don't think that we're not doing these things now to get those crowns. We're doing them now out of love for our Savior. And that should be our motivation, because I don't know how all this is going to work out. It's in 1 Corinthians 3 and 2 Corinthians 5 are the kind of the 2 key chapters talking about the bema judgment. And there's going to be people there that, all of our works are tested by fire, and only the wood, hay, and stubble will get burned up. Whatever those works are, no matter how good we thought they were, if they were done with the wrong intentions, if they were done not doing what Christ told us to do, et cetera, et cetera. That stuff seems to be the stuff that gets burnt up. But the gold, silver, and precious stones, those are just purged and purified with the fire. So I don't think it's about getting as many as we can. I think it's just being faithful in whatever God's called us to do, being faithful in doing that. From Sherry, I listened to Pastor McKibben for over a year now. He had Gary Wayne on and watched a few of his other teachings. What do you make of his teachings? And would you recommend to continue? I don't know Gary Wayne personally. I know Gary McKibben knows him. And I don't think Gary Wayne is pre-trib. So right off the bat, I think I would probably disagree with him on that point. He might be. The last I heard, he wasn't, and that was a year or two ago. So I don't know. Typically, if he were in the pre-trib crowd, we would be, we'd see him on Tom Hughes, we'd see him, all over the place. But generally, when folks come in and they're in other orbits, because they generally are in those eschatological position camps or whatever, every once in a while they cross over because of a particular subject, like say Genesis 6 or Nephilim or something that groups with differing opinions on eschatology or on the rapture position in particular can come together and have conversations about like subjects. Like, I mean, even with like J.B. Hickson, I think he and I would disagree strongly on political stuff, but we could still come together and talk about the rapture. We can come together and talk about Nephilim, cryptids, a whole laundry list of other things that, that we could break bread on, so to speak. And I think that's the same with Gary Wayne. I don't know him personally. I don't know enough about his ministry. The last I read or saw, he wasn't pre-trib. So I think that's the kind of the issue that I would have. But I mean, if you're watching him on stuff about the Nephilim, then the whole thing with the issue of the rapture doesn't, really have any bearing any consequence in that. Same thing with like Glenn Beck, the dude's a Mormon. So yet he's got a brilliant mind for putting puzzles together, pieces that are missing and seeing what's not there. And yet, Amir Sarfati went on his channel. Other evangelical Christians have gone on there and done stuff with him. Yet we would, they're not talking about that subject. They're talking about whatever it is, Israel or some other issue, but they're not going to talk about the validity of Mormonism or Joseph Smith's visions. Which is unfortunate because, Mormonism is so easily disproved. I just don't understand how anybody is still in that church. But from Popple Backyard Farm, is there a way to connect AI, aliens, and the Antichrist, and how will that work? There is a way to connect it all. It's called the Hegelian dialectic. And I think there's always one of those working at some stage all the time in varying facets. And it's not like it's monolithic in how it's applied. It's applied across a lot of different aspects of reality. So, and this is just my thinking, right? May not be the way it plays out, but we know that in the scripture, there's a thing called the rapture. It's going to happen. And when it does happen, and again, I'm just using this as a generic number. I'm not saying that it's more or less or whatever. 10%. 10% of the world's population is caught up, right? Satan, if he doesn't do something at that point, will have a huge dilemma on his hands because now he's got to figure out a way to explain to the other 90% where the 10% went. Presumably loved ones, children, babies, that stuff is going to have that impact across all different kinds of cultures. So what better way to deceive people, because we know Satan is a liar, the father of lies, that at that same moment that the rapture happens, there is some type of a alien event, alien, air quotes, or simultaneously a singularity event where it's so earth shattering that it's like, whoa, like, that like Skynet becomes a thing, right? I mean, that would be news all over the world, because that would change everything. That both could happen at the same time too. So it'll be something that is going to distract the world. If you have a global level crisis, you need a global level distraction. So the only two things that could fill that void at the moment on a global scale would be aliens or some type of singularity event where it's not just Elon Musk saying it. It's like this thing has come to life and it's taken over, kind of thing. So yeah, I could see that easily happening. So with regard to the Antichrist, it depends. So aliens could come down and land in the White House lawn, lizard people or whatever they look like, and they could point out some staffer in the back and say, that's the guy you need to follow. We can tell he's got his spiritual spirit guide is whatever. They could make up some kind of reason. They'll select some guy and say, he's the guy you should pick. And that guy could be thrust into from anonymity to the spotlight overnight. And that could be the Antichrist. So I think whoever the Antichrist is, that these other two entities, both AI and whatever this AI system becomes the final one that kind of dominates the rest of them, as well as any of these type of disclosure events, will point to the Antichrist and say, that's who you should follow. And the humanity will follow because of that. Now, I will say that, we're not going to know who the Antichrist is. The church is not going to know who that is this side of the rapture, but I think it's possible to know who the false prophet is. I think it's Yuval Noah Harari. And if you listen to him in his speeches here, the newer iterations, but the old ones too, I mean, first of all, everything out of that guy's mouth is blasphemous, just pure blasphemy from start to finish. I've never seen a guy that's that blasphemous. I'm not even seeing, these Richard Dawkins and these kinds of, popular atheists out there that blasphemous. And he is also stating AI as being the next evolution in mankind, and he's stating it with such confidence and such sureness that he really believes this. This is not something he's just doing to sell books. Like he believes that this is the way it's going to be, and he's stating these things as facts. So I don't know. He looks like a false prophet to me, a good candidate at least. Okay, from Gary Turner, do you think that China is baiting us into Iran in order to take Taiwan? No. I think, once we took Venezuela, it set into motion this domino effects of like Cuba, because Cuba was completely dependent upon Iran. But between Cuba and Venezuela, those were the two big, Brazil, I think too, but more Venezuela and Cuba were the partners in crime, if you will, with the Chinese and the Russians for black market oil, weapon systems, all that kind of stuff, terrorist groups, destabilization, drugs. They were all kind of in cahoots together. And it seems like we are trying to weaken that axis of power out by taking out the linchpin, which was Maduro. So you take Maduro out, blockade Cuba. Now they can't, their country's going to collapse. And both of those were, Cuba was the longest standing communist face of communism in the West. And that's on the verge of collapsing here in the next month or two. The U.S. strikes Iran, completely obliterating their ICBMs, their whatever possible hidey holes they have for Khomeini. And I think Trump came out and said, hey, we know where Khomeini sleeps. You better not stay in the same place too long, or something to that effect. So it was one of those tweets where he's baiting Khomeini. But those were allies of China. just like in Venezuela, the Chinese and the Russians had sold them all these state-of-the-art air defense weapon systems that we just went through like it was nothing. So now they're losing money on that front because nobody else is going to want to buy them if they can't keep us out. So I don't know. It doesn't feel like it feels right now like China has enough stuff going on inside of China, all the political unrest and turmoil. I don't know how much they're focused outward at the present. And Taiwan is like a porcupine. I mean, it is so got so many defense systems and all this stuff in place that. Now, I will say this: a couple of years ago, I wrote about a scenario where it seems like Russia. The plan was at the time, because Biden had just took over, they stole the 2020 elections. I think Putin knew that was fraudulent. The Chinese probably knew it was fraudulent. And so they have an imposter in. He's also very weak. He's got a lot of health challenges and age challenges. And he's also on the take from the Chinese. So they've got him in their pocket. I think the initial plan was Putin and Xi met in February of 2022, right before the Winter Olympics in Beijing. And Putin said, hey, this is going to happen. I'm going to take out Ukraine. And if we're going to do it, we're going to do it now before, while Biden's in office. And then I think China was like, yeah, we're going to take on Taiwan. Because right after we pulled out of Afghanistan, the Chinese were trolling Taiwan like crazy on Twitter and all that kind of stuff, or X, whatever. And we're making all sorts of really, veiled threats and some very open threats about taking Taiwan to the Taiwanese leadership. So it seems like there was a small window of time for that. And then Russia went so badly or poorly into Ukraine, it went south so fast that I think China began to second, yeah, we're going to hold on to this take Taiwan plan we have. We're going to just kind of put that back on the shelf. And so they, but had they taken out Taiwan, or had they tried to launch on Taiwan, they could have unleashed Kim Jong-un, and he could have, attacked South Korea. So now, and then at that time, also, when I wrote this, Iran would have hit Saudi Arabia and then launched missiles at Israel, but mostly Saudi Arabia, cripple the oil economy there. You would have had 4 different conflicts going on, in the United States primarily would have been divided up into 4 different theaters, greatly reducing our ability to fight. And then on top of that, because Europe, wasn't ready, the French, British, all the rest of them weren't ready. So we would have had a 4-front war, that we would not have won had they done that, but they didn't. I think when things went so poorly with Russia and Ukraine, that caused hesitancy on the Chinese, and then Trump came in, and now it's like too late. So now they're having to recalibrate. Now they were looking at 2027 to take Taiwan. I don't know if that's still going to happen or not, but that's the year to watch for with them if we're still here. Okay. From Asset Ministries, have you heard that UK is going to allow Sharia law? I have not heard that, and I'm very sad for them. And I'm telling you, that's going to trigger some kind of civil war in the UK. It's going to trigger something. They already started this Restore Party, which has gone viral. And I really think that, one, this Epstein thing is going to impact Keir Starmer. He may have to step down because of his ties with Mandelson and Epstein. And even his own party is trying to throw him out. So I don't give Keir Starmer that long left. If a Reform Party or some other Restore or Reform are able to get seats in these next elections, and they can start to turn the tide, I don't know. I don't know if it's too late for the UK, but I know people are pissed off over there, and they're not going to put up with it for much longer. I'm surprised they put up with it this long, but the British are notoriously polite. So we'll see. All right, guys, I think that's all the questions, and we are right at 2 hours. Man, that went quick. Well, thank you for hanging out tonight. Yeah, I don't think Mondani's going to last too long in New York City. Texas is passing these. I don't think it's just Texas. There's a number of states that are passing anti-Sharia law bans or anti-Sharia laws, putting them on the books. All right, guys. Well, God bless you. Thank you for hanging out tonight. Again, I don't think I'm on the rest of the week. I don't know if these recordings, when they'll drop. So when they do drop, I'll post them. Check out Randy's article on Substack. It's the Kingdom. And then John Bellum's going to have an article on Wednesday called 1933. So I'm currently knee-deep in my slides for all the conferences coming up. So I don't know the next time I'll get a chance to write an article. But look for me on... I don't know. We'll shoot for Wednesday and maybe Thursday for the Substack Live. And, that's where you guys, and then I'll fix it this time. It should have been, if you're a paid member, you could do the interaction stuff. And so when it sent out last time, it was like everybody could get on, but nobody could chat. So I was trying to get people to come on, but nobody could raise their hand. They couldn't act in the chat. So let me sort through all that. I'm still kind of working through Substack and all the little nuances. And they did change some things recently. So to supposedly make it easier for us. So, all right. Well, God bless you guys. And, yeah, we live in crazy times. There's a lot of cycles happening on top of each other, and a lot of plates. Imagine a guy on his back, both feet and hands in the air, spinning plates and stuff. And you got a plate on his nose. Like, there's all this stuff happening, and any one of those things could fall, and it could trigger this kind of chain reaction in any of those directions. So if we want things to go back to the way they were in, whatever kind of normalcy we imagined before, that, I wish, we didn't have to get strip search going on to a flight. There's obviously things that 9/11 changed and 2020 has changed, et cetera. But there, behind all that, we want some kind of semblance of winning, like we want our team to win. We want and all I'm saying is that none of the current teams are going to win. No team is going to win. I don't care what political letter they have behind their name, or what country they come from, or what political belief they have. The Bible says that the world is going to be turned into this beast kingdom, the kingdom of the beast. And the whole world is going to be governed by this one man, the Antichrist. He's going to force everybody in the world to take a mark. And if you don't take it, you're killed. Now, the church is not going to be there. The church will have been removed before all this, at the rapture of the church. The rapture is not a standalone just event in and of itself, like we just get shot up out of the earth. No, the rapture is us meeting the Lord, our Lord and Savior, in the air, just like he promised to come take us back to be where he is. And it kills me that some Christians, so-called, they treat the rapture like it's some separate event from Jesus, like it's some roller coaster ride to nowhere, but off the earth. It's just kind of, we just get shot out. No, this is where Christ himself comes and gets us. We get to see him for the first time. So when people make fun of the rapture and they trash on it or trash on us for keeping this hope alive, I feel bad for them. I feel there's something hurts in me for them, that they are so broken and so damaged that they can't simply take the Bible for what it says and embrace it, and embrace this blessed hope. It's sad. It's pathetic. And what's funny, well, ironic, and funny in a tragic kind of way, they'll make videos of us all the time accusing us of fantasizing about the rapture or fantasizing about Jesus. And I'm like, you're fantasizing about me, or you're fantasizing about Tyler or Chooch or Watchman River or somebody, because we're living in your head rent free 24/7, and we're getting blasted because we want to be with our Savior. That's pretty bizarre, if you ask me. Anyways, you can accuse me of fantasizing about being with Christ, being back together, being with our Creator. That's fine. Oh yeah, perhaps today. But hey, you know what? It may not be today. It may not be tomorrow. So we still got to live here. So head on a swivel, lean into the storm, buckle down, do what God's called you to do, and keep your chin up, keep looking up. Our redemption is going to come very quickly. Think back to the 90s. Think how quickly that went. If you're feeling like 2027 is forever away, just think back to 1999 or pick a time in the past, and you'll see how fast time goes. So be here, be present, be salt and light, love on your family, take advantage of the time we have, and be a blessing to those people around you. And I want to say thank you also. Well, thank you, Kelly. But that reminded me, this lady, Shiloh, her son that's had the brain surgery, he just needed help getting money to help offset his bills. He's had all these brain surgeries over the years. And so when she reached out to me, I typically don't do this because, I don't know but this has been one of those ongoing things for a long time. And so I just want to say thank you for her, for meeting those needs and just really just going out of your way, because we've already exceeded the initial amount. And I know it means a lot to them to be in the situation they are. Pray for Tyler. I guess Tyler's sick, and his wife and his family. Pray for brother Adam, Watchman Adam. I think he was in the hospital. I don't know who else is injured or hurt. But yeah, it's a grind. It's a grind here day in, day out. I can't believe I'm still doing this after 16 years. And I'm thankful. I'm thankful that the Lord has given me this and given me this drive to keep going. I've seen a lot of people come and go. And they burn out, or they get tired of watching and they just go do something else. And I don't ever want to be in that situation. No matter how discouraged I ever get, I want to just keep plugging away until he comes. I know I'm not perfect, but I just want to be found faithful in that one thing. So anyways, thank you guys. God bless you. Oh yeah, Pastor JD, keep praying for him. That's still sucks. Death sucks. Yeah. But thank you guys. God bless you. I love you all. And one last thing. I am constantly looking at like such negative stuff all the time that on my Facebook page, I tend to like post funny stuff. I need that for myself, because like this world sucks. There's a lot of sucky stuff going on right now. So I need to bring a little levity in my life. So if you're ever on my Facebook page and you're like, why is he always posting all this funny stuff? I need it for my own mental sanity, to keep myself, from becoming too serious with myself, I guess. So anyways, just if you're on my Facebook page, that's why I post a lot of it. I do post serious stuff on there too, but it's mostly like just me cutting up. But all right, God bless you guys. Take care, and see you next time.